Welcome to tonight's shir on Parshas Chazak, Parshas Vayechi Chazak. So I will share with you a story, but first we'll deal with the first question. So someone asked me, it's not a question lahalocha, but I did look around to find some sources. So when after the Mabul, then takes time until finally the Teva settles on Har Arorot, and then Noach and his family exit the Teva, and then Noach builds a Mizbeach. He builds a Mizbeach and he understands from the fact that Hashem told him to take from the Behemoth HaTorah, from the kosher animals, to take extra. So he understood he brings him his extra, bring a korban. Where did this Mizbeach happen? Where was this offering taking place? So you could think it was just by Har Arorot. But it says here in the Targum Yonason. So you have Targum Onkelos, who's more literal. Targum Yonason is more generous with additional explanations. So Noach builds a Mizbeach. Hu madbecho de bono Odom. This is the same Mizbeach which was built by Odom, Be'idan de Itrad, when he was banished, Minginso de Eden, from the Garden of Eden. V'yakriv aloi korbono. And it was there that Odom Harishon offered a korban. We learned from a pasuk in Tilim, Makrin Mafris. V'iloi akrivu Kain v'Hevel yos korbanein. It's actually the same altar was used for by Kain and Hevel for their offerings. V'chadnachsu moed de toivana. When the waters of the flood receded, Itzad. I think Itzad means it got ruined. Uvanye Noach, and Noach now rebuilt it. V'nosov, and he took Mikol Be'ira Dachya, from all the kosher species. Mikol Oivduchei, and from the kosher birds, animals, birds. V'asik Arba al Hahun Madbecha, and he offered probably four of each species. That's what I'm understanding. So meanwhile, what we have here is the location of this Mizbeach is not near Arorot. Arorot is somewhere in Kurdistan, Horikardu to Rikardu, and from Kurdistan to come down to Eretz Yisrael, it's probably a few hundred miles. So the question was put to me: how did Noach get down with all the animals and with the food and the equipment? He says, how did he had to have wagons? How did he get wagons? And okay, so before we go into responding to that, we have here the Pirush Radak, who says that possibly Mizbech was in the Mount Arorot, where the Teva rested. Possibly the Teva itself moved to somewhere, slid to somewhere lower, and that's where Noach, or Noach went elsewhere. And then he brings from Drash that it was Al HaMizbech HaGodel Shebirushalayim. So, and this we know in the Rambam, in beginning of Perik Beis of Hilchos Beis Abchira, he identifies that the Mizbeach is on the site where Noach gave his offering. So we're dealing now with the geographical, the logistics. How did Noach get from Arorot till the Yerushalayim? So, and there's a few questions here. He had food in the Teva, and in the Teva, all the animals of prey behaved in a way that they did not prey. They did not kill any other animals. So they must have lived on vegetarian stuff. When they left the Teva, how did they survive? How did these animals live when they left the Teva? Till they got back, till until the supply of other animals would kind of replenish, that they should be able to have their prey. So it must have taken some time. So it's possible that they actually, yes, that they continued eating vegetarian stuff. And when they came out to the Tavor, then it says right after this posuk, there was Zera v'kotzir koyer v'choim akayetz v'choyriv. So the seasons came back into play. So these animals probably made their way back to their natural habitat. So I'm not so worried about that. How did they get down from Har Ararat? Now, what's interesting is that there's no mention of use of wagons earlier on in the Torah. When Eliezer travels, he travels with camels, 10 camels. When Yaakov returns from Lavan territory back to Canaan, he uses camels. When the Shvatim go down to Mitzrayim to get provisions, they are using donkeys. The first mention of wagons is when Yosef tells Paro that his brothers are dead, and so the Paro says, "Send them wagons." So this is the first mention of wagons. So let's finish off this point. Noach did not use wagons. He didn't need to build wagons, and the way he probably used the animals, which were able to carry packs, and he had probably the packs of food which he could take with him. It doesn't. So the only thing is that it wasn't right after the end of the Babel till he got to Yerushalayim. Must have taken a good few weeks. Fine. And this. And where was all his equipment? Yeah, as if to say he had all of this, washing machines and drying machines and machine tools. Well, in a very simple life. Clothing. How many sets of clothing they have? Where did they work? They lived very simple. So I'm not too worried about that, and they could manage to deal with all of this stuff en route also. Just as a question of time. Hashem obviously did not want them to stay in Kurdistan, on top of the mountain, and the most welcoming location would be obviously Eretz Yisrael, for the simple reason that it was the only region which was not ravaged by the flood. We have learned from a pasuk, that although the flood waters may well have spilt over into Eretz Yisrael, but the underground springs which came up everywhere else, they didn't happen in Eretz Yisrael. And so the destruction which took place elsewhere did not take place in Eretz Yisrael, and therefore it makes sense it was the most welcoming place, and so he made his way there. How did he know? I don't know, perhaps the same birds who with the olive leaves, etc. So he got his news that over there there's it's a place, it's a welcoming place. Right. So coming back to the wagons, though. So I'm not so worried. It took him time. It says, we say it was necessary. So it took time. It took a few weeks. Okay, fine. I saw it elsewhere in Torah Shlema. He brings that the Mizbeach, which had been built by Adam Harishon, had been destroyed to some degree, which also it says over here was damaged by the flood, which is a little bit interesting, contradicting what I just said. Okay, fine. But then, okay, so now I'm looking at the wagons. When Yaakov Avinu, closer to our parsha, when Yaakov Avinu sees the wagons, so then Vayar Yaakov es hagolos, Yaakov Avihem, and he remembers the last learning session which he had with Joseph, and that was about Egel Arufah. And that's the story about someone who, a body was found dead, and the obvious accusation is, why did the people of the town not take care of him? So therefore, there's a whole business of taking a calf and chopping off its head and saying, for neglect of looking after wayfarers. So Yaakov had learned this halacha because Yosef was being sent on a journey. So Yaakov had learned with him the halacha of achila shtia levio, that when you have a guest, a wayfarer, you should provide them with food and accompany them on the beginning of their journey, which possibly he did. So then Yaakov sees the agolis, and he remembers Eglah Rufa agolis. It's a difference of 20 years, but fine. What bothers me is a little what made Yaakov, if according to what I'm suggesting, that wagons were a new innovation, who gave them the name Agolis? Why did Yaakov call them an Agola? Oh, Vayaras Agos. Oh, Agolo, Egel, Egla Rufo. What made the association? Because when it comes to a natural species, so then Oda Marishan gave them the names. But when it comes to a wagon, who gave the name? Who made the name wagon? It's a convention. Someone gave it the name. So that I don't know. Meanwhile, I looked up in there's a sefer called Sefer Sharoshim of Radak, where he, under the entry of Egel, so you've got various meanings of this Shirish, and he suggests that the name Agola comes because they used to build their carriages round. If you see old pictures of chariots, they would be round. I don't understand why he has to say such a pshat. I would say the amazing invention of a wagon is that it's got round wheels. The fact that it's able to proceed over flat land easily is because it's got round wheels. So call it Agola because of the round wheels. So I don't know why he doesn't say that. Fine. Right. So now, as I said, I'm going to tell you a story, and that is that there's a story of with the Rebbe Rashab and a couple of Chassidim who had some kind of dispute. They were wood merchants, timber merchants. And the Rebbe Rashab asked Reb Shmuel Gorari to hear them out, and then he wants him to write up his psak, and he wants to see the psak. I'm afraid this is going to be lost on those who don't understand Kabbalah language, but never mind. So then he writes up his psak about the logs, and he writes the logs, he calls them, how do you call logs? We would say koiros, he calls them igulim. So the Rebbe, then he presents his psak, his write-up of the psak, and the Rebbe reads igulim, what's the igulim? Noch igulim, weiter igulim. Says, ich sehe als igulim, aber wo ist Yesher? In Kabbalah you have a language, igulim, shar igulim v'yesher. So you're talking all about the igulim, where's your Yesher? See, it looks like the Rebbe wasn't so impressed with the Yesher of the psak, which Reb Shmuel Gorari had suggested. Okay, fine. Lassen wir weiter. So here's a question about sleeping with a tal's cotton. Now, this is not unanimous. You should know that by Chassidim, by Chabad Chassidim especially, there's a strong emphasis to sleep with a tal's cotton. It says in the Arizal, even Hilchos Shniyos talks about sleeping with a tal's cotton. But there are those who don't. The raya for the Arizal is the whole story that David HaMelech once it was in the Merchatz, and he's he's naked without any mitzvah. And he remembered he has the bris milah. He says, if he didn't wear a tal's cotton at night, so why wasn't he also having the same problems every night? Elamai, he slept with a tal's cotton. The question is that a beged laila, the chayre is potter from tzitzis. So the Gemara says, machloikus with a tzitzis is mitzvah saseh as man gromo or ein as man gromo. And if you say it's mitzvah saseh as man gromo, so there's two ways of saying. One is the approach of Rashi and the Rambam, that any garment which you wear during the day, if it's got four corners, has to have tzitzis. Wear the same garment at night, it doesn't need to have tzitzis. Tosfos learns, Tosfos learns that a beged yoim, if the garment is a beged yoim, even if you're wearing it balayla, it's chayiv tzitzis. And by the same argument, if it's a beged laylo, even if you wear it by day, it's part of an tzitzis. I must share with you the late Rav Moshe Katznelbergen, when he came out of Russia. I remember when he came out, it was around 1970. But then he went off. He had a brother in Cleveland, and his brother bought him a pair of pajamas. He'd never heard of pajamas in Russia. His brother told him, in America, the minig is at night you wear pajamas. Okay, fine. Kabbalah Sayel, I wear pajamas. Fine. So about 9 p.m., some visitors knocked at the door. I heard this from Rav Moshe. So some visitors knocked at the door. They heard a Yid came from Russia, a big Talmud Chacham. They'd love to see him. It was at 9 p.m. Fine. So Rav Zalman knocks at Rav Moshe's door. He says, "You find a Parmeshik come from there." So he says, "Sure, no problem." He comes out with his pajamas. So he understood this. The beged layla in America, by night you wear pajamas. You didn't realize it means dafka when you go to sleep. So you have a beged layla, so a beged hamyuchid layla. So the equivalent, if you wear it by yom, it's also potem in tzitzis. But if it's so, the beged hamyuchid layla. So if you have a pair of tzitzis which you wear only at night, so then according to Rambam you're not doing a mitzvah, and according to Tosfos you're not doing a mitzvah because it's a beged layla. So how do you deal with this? Now, I've got on the top here from the Tzemach Tzedek. Now, this is the Tzemach Tzedek in Piskei Dinim. Zeir Geschmack Shtickle. This is, I spent an hour perhaps on Friday going through this Shtickle Tzemach Tzedek, showing the strength of the Svara, and just one word. That I said before, there's a Machlokes of Rambam and Tosfos. And there's also in Gemara, there's others who just say that Zlailos Mansitzis. Sorry, they say that Noshim Chayovas B'tzitzis. Yes, that's a mitzvah saseh shaloyas mangram. Listen to this carefully. A normal mitzvah saseh mangram means during the day, it's a time you have to do it by this time. Another time, no point in doing it. Here, Tosfos is saying this garment, if it's a daytime garment, it has to have tzitzis, even at night. If it's a nighttime garment, it doesn't have to have tzitzis. Is that called a mitzvah saseh shazman garoma? Does the time? It's defining the garment, not defining the duty of the person. So there's an argument to say that even if, according to Tosfos, that there should be a mitzvah saseh shelo hazman garoma. So there's a svara that those who say that Rabbanon who say that tzitzis is ein hazman garoma, they hold like Tosfos pshat in Reb Shimon. They say lalocha that the Rabbanon are saying that it's that a beged yoim is chayiv belayla, and therefore they hold this mitzvah saseh shelo yazman garoma. Therefore noshim chayovas. That's part of the pilpul over there. All right, that's enough. If I've enticed your appetite to spend some time reading up the Tzemach Tzedek in Piskei Dinim, but allow yourself at least a half an hour to get through it. Nafka Mina says she should be careful to sleep at night with a towel's cotton. Hamyuchid leyoim belaylo. It has to be a garment which is also worn at night. Because according to Tosfos and according to Rabbanan, etc., then you fulfill the mitzvah tzitzis. But if it's a garment which is just a night garment, then it doesn't. Then it's part of an tzitzis. What have you achieved? So here you have now from the Piskei Teshuvos. Indeed, one should be particular that the night towel's cotton should be that you wear it also by day. At least you should wear it occasionally by day. And this way, it's chayiv tzitzis according to the Rosh. Tosfos Rosh says the same thing. That ksus yoim is chayiv tzitzis balayla. So what I told the person who asked me the question, I said, when you put the daytime tzitzis into the wash, so then the nighttime tzitzis you'll wear during the day, then it remains a beged yoim. And beged yoim v'layla, so chayiv tzitzis, and you're good. Then it's interesting. He brings that other fine Jews would not do so, and they'd wear a towel cotton just for the night, and they felt that's good enough. But you see here for Tzemach Tzedek, not so. It says clearly that the night tzitzis should be in beged hamiyuchad leyom v'layla. Fine. Let's move on. And here's a question like this. A man sends me that he's sitting by a Verbrengen Shabbos afternoon, and he's after Kiddush and after whatever, he's sitting in the middle of Verbrengen, and his little boy comes over and says, Tati, I'm hungry, and I haven't had Kiddush. Tati, can you make Kiddush for me? I guess they didn't have grape juice. So Tati, now his question is, he has already got Hagofen in place, yeah? He's already in the middle of eating. In the middle of Verbrengen. So he's already Yotze Hagofen. He said Hagofen. So can he make a bracha Hagofen for his child? So what's the question? To do a mitzvah, a birchas ha-mitzvahs, for someone who's incapable, then there's a concept of arvis. You can make a bracha for them. And from the Alter Rebbe, it looks like clear. Talks about times when you can't drink the wine. You give the wine to a child on a fast day, so a bris on a fast day. You give the wine to a child, was a gia lechinuch brachas. So to give, if I hadn't taken just now, this previous Tuesday, my enical Menachem Mendel ben Shmuel Yosef had his bris on a Tzem Gedalia. So what do you do with the wine? So either if the mother is not able to fast, so you give the mother to drink the wine. And if she is fasting or she's not there, so then you give it to a child who is over the age of chinuch. What did I say? Sorry, Batavis, yeah? No? Whatever. Okay. You give it to a child who's the age of chinuch, which means not to a 3-year-old child, although 3-year-old children also say brachas. That doesn't mean they're higia lechinuch. All right, not another pilpul. But you give it to a child 6 years old, 7 years old, 9 years old. So you can make a bracha and the child who's gia lechinuch. So your bracha is kind of being utilized by that child who's a gia lechinuch. As if it would be less than a gia lechinuch, then he wouldn't be justifying your bracha. So here's the question, though, that here is the kiddush by day called a birchas ha-mitzvahs, and therefore you have an arvis, a responsibility, or is it just a birchas hanenin? And if you want to eat an apple, I cannot say your Bayer Priha eats for you, because I don't have a responsibility that you should eat an apple. I have a responsibility that you should hear Kiddush. Therefore, I can make a Kiddush for you. I can't make a brocha for your apple. So this was my dilemma. So here you have, from the Shmiras Shabbos Kol Choso, the second volume of Shmiras Shabbos Kol Choso is dedicated to things like Kiddush and Havdalah, Hilchos Chol HaMoed, another few other bits and pieces. So there he writes that you are able to do Kiddush for others, even if you already passed Kiddush, or if you don't want to be Yotze for yourself, and you're allowed to say Hagofen, or for that matter, Shahakal if it was Chamar Medina. And then who drinks the wine? It can be either yourself or the listener. It doesn't matter. There has to be, the brocha has to be used. And he says that you could make Kiddush for that other person. I'm just adding that even if it's a child who's a Gia Lechinuch, so the father could make Kiddush for his child, even though make a Be'er Piagofen, and then the child is able then to have some food and continue Verbringen. Right. So here's the next question. You see here a pop-up toaster, and someone just pointed out that a child is allowed to eat before Kiddush. That is true, that if a child wants to eat before Kiddush, you can tell he's allowed to. But this child was asking, he wants to have Kiddush, so then you're allowed to make Kiddush for him. Yeah. So now here's the question. So Bocher has got his toaster in his room, and a friend of his came in with a slice of pizza and popped it into the toaster. So now the toaster became milchik. So the next thing is, well, and sometimes he wants to have toast, which is will be para, perhaps a bit fleshik. Can you kasher a toaster? very awkward because to kasher it, you'd have to take it apart, so to speak, to get in there inside. So just to save myself time, I checked on a website called CRC, which is Chicago Rabbinical Council. Got lots of very useful information there. And they have a list of what things you can kasher, what you can't kasher. Kitzer, they say a toaster can't be kashered. Okay, fine. Can't kasher it. So now it's milchik toaster. So then, a very from boy, he asks, if that's the case, am I allowed to use it even for parev? Why is that? He knows there's a din in Shulchan Aruch that you're not allowed to make milchike bread. Every kid in Eretz Yisrael knows that barekes, which are triangular, are cheese barekes, and square ones are potato barekes. I know we in Chutz La'aretz don't know about this, but they know that this triangle is a simon that it's milchik. So if you'd make bread, milchike bread, it'd have to be made in a way that anyone who sees it knows that it's not regular bread. But you wouldn't be allowed to make milky bread. So he's asking, can I use this toaster to make bread, to boil toast bread, because it's going to look like parava toast, but really it's milchike toast. So I answered him, that's not a problem. As you can see here in Shulchan Aruch, it says, let's read the Lashon. One is not allowed to make a dough with milk, lest that someone will eat that bread with meat. If you did make a milchike dough, then all that bread is forbidden, even to eat it on its own. In other words, they were so concerned of this mix-up that this bread is condemned. But if it's only a small amount to be eaten in one session, then, or that you made in an unusual shape, then that is okay. So my response to him was, usually you toast just a couple of slices at a time, and that's how much you have at a meal. So you're not going to toast bread and have lots there waiting. It will be a mixture. You're going to toast and then eat it. Therefore, since it's a dover mu'at, it's not a problem. But I was impressed with the question. That's why I thought it would be worth sharing. Right, let's move on. So what you have in the top right-hand corner is from the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, which I was involved with, the Piskei Admor Hazoken and Minik Chabad. It was published about 4 years ago. Baruch Hashem, it's been reprinted about 4 or 5 times. And so he's asking, he writes here, I think Simon Memtes, is it? About Netilas Yadayim. That we say, Netilas Yadayim b'sh'as hashifshuf, as you're rubbing your hands together after washing, before drying. And then you raise your hands parallel to your heart, and he says you have the hands together. So he's asking, where does it say, where did we get this from, that Netilas Yadayim is said, the bracha was whilst you're rubbing your hands. So I looked up, and it was actually, I said it's in Likutei Diburim, that's referred to in the footnotes there. He only had a Hebrew edition of Likutei Diburim, not the Yiddish one. That's why he couldn't find the reference. But let's read the piece from Likutei Diburim Chelek Gimel. The Frierdiker Rebbe is talking about his father when he says Al Netilas Yadayim. So then he raises, this talk about in the morning, he raises his hands to the head, not higher than the level of the payas of the head. But this is different to the way he does when he washes Netilas Yadayim for the meal. There are 3 changes. When Netilas Yadayim in the morning, the hands are already dried. You wipe your hands and then you say the bracha. That's the first change. The second change is that the hands in the morning are raised till the head, as he said, they're level to the payas. The third thing is that the hands in the morning are fanande gespreit, which means are held apart. By contrast, Netilas Yadayim at the meal for bread. So then he'd say Netilas Yadayim b'shas hashifshuf, whilst rubbing the hands, after Netilas Yadayim, before wiping. Second point is that the lifting is only keneged halev, not higher, but more to the level of the chest. And the third thing is that the hands are held together, not fanande gespreit, not spread apart. So this is where we get this from, that saying the bracha b'shas hashifshuf. why? And then that's what it's written over here. So we have a source. The question is more the svara. What's the reason for saying it b'shas hashifshuf? Well, we want to have the idea of oivel asiyos. Normally, a brocha is said before the act of the mitzvah. With the Tir Yadayim, that's not possible because your hands are impure, so you can't say a brocha. So you first have to wash the hands and then say the brocha. But we still want to say the brocha before the act of the mitzvah. And so there's the Tir Yadayim, the washing. Then there's the rubbing of the hands, which is part of the mitzvah. Like when you wash your hands for hygiene, you rub your hands together to make sure to get off any particles of soil off your hands. And then there's the drying. So there's a svara in Shulchan Aruch that the drying is part of the mitzvah, since it's not we're not allowed to eat bread with wet hands. It would make the bread soggy, make it mius. Therefore, the drying is part of the mitzvah. So you make the bracha before drying. All right, that's one way around it, but it looks like there's a concern. Perhaps that's not part of the mitzvah mamish, whereas the shifshuf is considered still part of the mitzvah. So it's part of the shlemus harechitza, shlemus hanetila, and therefore you have this rubbing their hands, saying the bracha whilst rubbing their hands just before the wiping their hands. Okay, we can be mafalpal more about this, but fine. Let's go on. Someone else put here a question, was it? Someone put here a question about Chamit Tverio Be'eretz Yisrael. Very good, very good, very good. So that's about the question about did the Mabul affect Eretz Yisrael? Okay, this is okay. One back to the night sitzes. Someone's asking night sitzes. Since it's summer, it is day early. We're still sleeping. It's a ksus lailo v'yoim. That's an interesting svara. I still think it's miyuchid lalayla. It happens to be that you're continuing your laila somewhat artificially, but still a beged. We wouldn't call pajamas beged yoim because we sleep when it's already daylight. Yeah. So I think it's still called miyuchid lalayla, but okay. Right. Let's move on to the next question. So here I don't have any slide for this, but I had a bit of feedback. We had, if you remember, last week we had a discussion about on Shabbos Chanukah, instead of doing Shishi and Shvi together, the Balkoire and finished off as the Shishi by Shvi and made it after Bracha. And then what you do with Shvi, where so we said they made a Hishofah, and although Chabad don't do Hishofahs, and I explained why don't we do Hishofahs, because of the Svora of the Sefer Masas Binyamin, quoted in Simach Tzedek and Simon Lamed Hey, that what does it mean you're making a bracha when you have Aliyah Torah? What you're doing there? So here, the Masas Binyamin says really the bracha should be said by the Balkoire, but he allows the other people to say the bracha on his behalf. So this fellow, he's a Balkoire, and he says, it looks in the Beis Chabad, people, not always the people are so literate. So he start when he would say Bochu Voch Shemoi, so then he found that they were getting confused. So he started saying Bochu Voch Shemoi quietly, not to confuse the people with his interjections. So then the next thing, he says that sometimes the people needed a little bit of help in saying the bracha, and with saying Bochu Voch Shemoi, it was actually kind of interfering with his ability to help them. So he dropped saying Bochu Voch Shemoi. And now he says that if I am the Balkoire and he's saying the bracha for me, then it makes perfect sense. I shouldn't say Bochu Voch Shemoi, because if I say Bochu Voch Shemoi, then I can't be Yotze with the bracha because I've interrupted. So he says, instead it's a very good svara, that the Balkoire shouldn't say, according to this svara of Basas Binyamin, the Balkoire shouldn't say Bochu Voch Shemoi. I want to share with you, I mentioned this last night, many years ago, I got a call from the late Rebbe Kalmati from Bernal Shalom. And it was Motzei Shabbos, about an hour and a half after Shabbos, and he had been listening to Havdalah, and he said Bochu Voch Shemoi. So now, was he Yotze? Because it could be it's a hefsek. Now, to find, with a sofek, to find someone else to make who hasn't made Havdalah an hour and a half, 2 hours after Shabbos is a little bit hard to find, even with Rabbeinu Tams and everything. But so I asked him, which Baruch Hu Baruch Shemai did you answer? The beginning of the bracha or the end of the bracha? Turns out it was the end of the bracha, in which case I said it's okay, you yotze. And I'll tell you where I'm coming from. Look, first of all, I want to say Baruch Hu Baruch Shemai. Someone says Baruch Ato Hashem, and we interject Baruch Hu Baruch Shemai. That the Baruch Hu is Ato. You said Baruch Ato, Baruch Hu. You said Hashem's name, Baruch Shemai. So that's the Baruch Hu Baruch Shemai, referring to the Ato and Hashem. But fine, the Alter Rebbe in Simon Kuf Chav Dalet, it's a din of Chazor Sashatz, talks about the minig of answering Baruch Hu Baruch Shemai. So we have to understand clearly that Baruch Hu Baruch Shemai is a level of minig, not a minig shechnor, but not a din. It's a minig. And the Alter Rebbe says that if you want to be Yotzei Bracha, you shouldn't answer Baruch Hu Baruch Shemai. And Ulai, perhaps, but you're also not Yotzei, because of your mafsik bein Hashem v'Malchus. And Baruch, you say Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam. So if you've interrupted between Shem and Malchus, you've kind of distorted the format of the bracha. So in the first part of the bracha, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech Haolam, Yansa Baruch Baruch Shemai, you've distorted between Shem and Malchus. In the end of the bracha, Baruch Atah Hashem Magdal Mikedesh L'Cheil, there's no distortion between Shem and Malchus, and therefore I felt your Yotzei. And as I'm saying this, it just also comes to mind, as far as I remember, the Minhag Sfardim is they say, even when you say Baruch Hu Baruch Shemai, you're still Yotzei. So there's plenty of room to rely on, but the Eved that you shouldn't have to repeat. Okay, let's move on. So I've started saying chapter Samach Vav in Tehillim this past week, and I noticed that it starts off Mizmor Lamasech Mizmor Shir Hariyu Leiloikim Kol Haaretz. Hariyu Leiloikim Kol Haaretz. In capital Kuf Mizmor Lasoida Hariyu LaShem Kol Haaretz. So I'm intrigued. Why does it switch between Hariyu Leiloikim Kol Haaretz and here's Hariyu LaShem Kol Haaretz? So I wanted to share with you a fascinating insight. This is from the Sefer Yashmiya Kol Tilosoi from Reb Shmuel Heber Zolzangizun. And he's talking about the Tehillim divided into 5 Sforim. Now, we understand that the first Sefer would be corresponding to Chesed, second one would be corresponding to Gvura, the third one according to Tiferes, and if you don't believe me, take the Tehillim, take the back of the Tehillim, the Hirotzins, which are said in Neshana Rabbah, and you see how each of the Sforim correspond to the those 5 midas. Chesed Gvur Tiferes Netzach Hoid Yisai. Sorry, Chesed Gvur Tiferes Netzach and Hoid. So here's a fascinating statistic. In the first volume of Tehillim, that's till Mem Aleph, there's 241 times Shem Yud Kei Vav Kei, and another 37 with a letter before. So that's how much is that? 178 times. Shem Elokim appears 13 times, another 2 times with Shem with a Shimush, so 15 times. So you've got about 170 times Shem Havaya, and Shem Elokim is 1/10 approximately of how many times it appears in the first Sefer. In the second Sefer, which is from Mem Beis through Ayin Beis, there you have Shem Elokim comes up 140 and another 25. This is 165 times Shem Elokim. Shem Havaya comes up 27 times, perhaps a little bit more, but the balance is startling. That in Shem, in second Sefer, you have many more times the choice of the Shem Elokim rather than Shem Havaya, which may explain to you if you notice, for example, Kapitel Yud Dalet in Tehillim and Kapitel Nun Gimel in Tehillim are almost identical, almost word for word. But here it's got in Yud Dalet, it's got Shem Havaya 5 times, and those 5 times in Kapitel Nun Gimel are Shem Elokim. And this is the simple. But this is the Hezber in Sefer Sheni, because it's corresponding to Midas HaGvura. Therefore, the Shem Elohim is there much more frequently than Shem Havaya, and therefore, coming back to this comparison of Hariul Hashem Kol Haaretz, Hariul Elohim Kol Haaretz, so in Kapitel Samach Vav, which is in Chelik Beis of Tehillim Sefer Beis, there's Hariul Elohim Kol Haaretz, whereas in Bismillah Soidois and the rest of Tehillim where Shem Havaya is more common than Shem Elohim. Just I'm sure you've noticed this before, that Hariyu Le'Elokim Kol Haaretz or Lashem Kol Haaretz is Rosh Hashanah Halacha, and Yishtachavu Lashem Bahadras Kodesh is Rosh Hashanah Kabbalah. Back to front, yeah? Kodesh Behadras Lashem Yishtachavu, yeah? Kabbalah. So here's Halacha and here's Kabbalah. Why is Halacha straightforward and why is Kabbalah back to front? The answer is because the Seder Satayra are not so obvious. Yeah, lass mich gehen weiter. Now, what do we have? Oh, practical question. So, someone asks me, very sincere in German, happens to be a relative also, but so I'm a bit biased, but I think he's very sincere in German. I'm not going to say any more. And he davens at a minyan at 6:30. This is not in London. This is somewhere else, somewhere in the United States. So don't ask me Nets, not Nets. It's a different country. He davens at 6:30. By 7:15, he has to leave because he has to help his wife to get the children dressed or get breakfast or take them to school, whatever. I'm not going to go in the whole Shalom Bayis story. But he needs to leave by 7:15. But what happens if in the minyan there are some people who are there because they need to say Kaddish, and by 7:15 there's still a couple of Kaddishim left, but he says, I can't stay. Now, what's the story? Does he have to stay, or, does he not have to stay? So let's take a look. We have here where do you find the dinim of minyan? So when's the first time you need a minyan? Not for tefillin and not for tzitzis, not for birchas hashachar, but for Baruch Hu. So in Siman Nun Hey, after Pesukah de Zimra, that's where we have the dinim about a minyan, and we have here this well-known or not so well-known halacha that if the chazan has started Kaddish or Kedusha, you're middle of a unit, and then Yotzu Miksosa, if some of those present left, and you no longer have a minyan, so you finish that Kaddish, you finish that Kedusha. So if you're middle of a unit, you finish that unit. That's the halacha in Shulchan Aruch, and we can go into more details, but that's the basic halacha. There's a unit. Then it says, the Rama adds, Aveira hi lotzeis. Although the minyan can finish the unit, but you have an Aveira for leaving them, and it says a pasuk, Hashem, etc. So you're not allowed to leave in the middle of a unit. Are you allowed to leave and they won't be able to do the next unit? So that is not clear in Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch, but in the Mishnah Berurah it says clearly. It says if someone joined the minyan for Baruch Hu, he's not mechuyev to wait for Chazos Hashatz, because that's another unit. And therefore, how much more so the Shir Shel Yoim or Kaveh or Aleinu, these are separate units, they're not part of the, so to leave before the end of a Volotzion is taka a problem, because it's middle of a unit. But to leave after Volotzion, they want to say another unit. Okay, so listen. And the practical thing is, if you're going to start giving this guy a hassle for leaving early, for leaving what, and when he has to leave, the likelihood is he'll just go to another minyan, and you'll be you just have to, if you need to get more people, so work on it and get more people to make up your minyan for later on. What can you do? But he's allowed to leave. Yeah. Now here's an interesting question. Maybe Yehuda asked this question. When one person or even two people or three people have left, you finish the unit. Why is that okay? Isn't Hashros Hashchina only when you have 10 people? So he says, evidently, Hashros Hashchina can manage with less than 10 people also. If that's the case, why is it an Avera to leave? If the Shechina is going to be there in any case, why is it an Avera to leave? Therefore, he says that the Hashtarosh Shechina remains. He says that you need that the Avera is that they won't be able to say the next unit. But that goes against the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah says you don't have to say for the next unit. I vector. What's the cheshbon here? We must say that indeed that unit you can finish off. There's Hashtarosh Shechina to the degree that you can finish off that unit, but you have ultimately diminished the Hashtarosh Shechina to some degree, and therefore it's not okay to leave in the middle of a unit. In that same tshuva, though, the Shevet Halevi says, but there may be sometimes when it's a major loss of money or whatever it may be, so this will also be waived. And if you have to go, you have to go, and that makes perfect sense. Unless you want to discourage people coming to minyan in the first place, that if they have to go, they have to go. And the fact that the minyan is compromised, well, we'll have to try harder to get more people to come. Offer them some nice cocoa afterwards with some kokosh or something, as is many fine shuls that they offer breakfast after Shachris, and that's one of the ways of getting more people for your minyan. Right. What else do we have here? Okay, so we're almost the last question. It's the 9th question on our list, and we'll give it a couple of minutes. So, I for Hay Tavis, I bought myself a new sefer, and it's called Bechadre Seirosecho, and it's a fascinating piece of work where it's the correspondence of Reb Leibel Grona, the Rebbe's Gabe, Reb Leibel, and the Rebbe expected him to give feedback. So every Farbrengen, every Motzei Shabbos, when there was a Farbrengen, he'd go home and spend a couple of hours going through the stuff, the things which the Rebbe had discussed, and researching, and because he knew the Rebbe would ask in the morning, "Do you have any feedback?" And he would write his comments, and the Rebbe would respond. And so the first part of the volume has got facsimiles, photographs of the actual notes, and the Rebbe's in Label's handwriting, and the Rebbe's also Ksav Yad Kodesh responses. And the second part goes through researching each I think. Okay, so now the title of this article, let's just find it. It has here Tzedakah Koidem Arvis. Is it appropriate or not appropriate to give tzedakah before Ma'ariv? So now let's read the Rebbe's note over here. It's a note in a letter from 15th of Elul, Tovshin Lamed Daled. And Nesinas tzedakah. So from the stimas, the simple lotion of the Shulchan Aruch in Siman Tzadik Beis in Orach Chaim, which it appears that you should give tzedakah before Ma'ariv. Now this one you see on the lower left, the upper one, the quote from that's Orach Chaim. Toivlit in tzedakah koden tefillah. It doesn't say which tefillah, and they add v'zil basar timer. Follow the logic. It's got to do with now what's the timer. So the Gemara says Rebbe Lezer would give a pruta to Ani b'tzedek echzeh fonecha, with the merit of doing tzedakah, I will come to meet Hashem. And then the Rebbe refers to Shulchan Aruch Yeredeya, Reish Memtes, and that's the lower quote. Toivlit in pruta le'ani koidem kol tefillah, shenem ani b'tzedek echzeh fonecha. So it seems to be the reasoning of the Orach Chaim, and it's even more explicit in Yeredeya, koidem kol tefillah. V'leikosav came b'Priyetz Chaim. Priyetz Chaim is going through the Halon Hogas Arizal, Apikabola, and there it talks about by Ma'ariv that it's not appropriate to give tzedakah before Ma'ariv. That restriction is only for the misnag and those who behave al derech hasoid, their behavior is only al derech hakabbalah. Then he refers to Yerushalmi and Shkolim. There it talks about a certain Reb Chinana who used to go at night and he used to distribute tzedakah to poor people. And one time he was confronted by the Rabba de Ruchaya, by the master of the spirits. And he says, what's the Hasagas Gvul? You're trespassing. If this is nighttime, is my territory. And aren't you aware of that? You shouldn't be trespassing. So Reb Chineda says, I have a posuk which says, Matan b'seiser yichpe af. A gift of tzedakah is this, given discreetly, will subdue the wrath. And this ruach, the spirit, ran off. So there we're seeing also the Bchidah quotes this Gemara, this Yerushalmi, as being the source or a support for this idea, which is written in Kabbalah, of that Laila is not appropriate time for tzedakah. It does it, but it's not necessarily appropriate for everyone. Then, okay, that's the reference to Birchiyos. Okay, so when you read this quote, so then you can get the impression that the Rebbe is recommending that you should give tzedakah before Ma'ariv. I have one little problem, that we saw the Rebbe hundreds of times coming in and out for davening, and when he came from Mincha, he would give tzedakah, and people would wait in the corridor, and he would give out pennies and nickels, whatever it was, to children, adults sometimes. But by my night, it wasn't to say that. If you're worried about my memory, there's a sefer called Maaseh Melech, which kind of describes the Rebbe's minhagim on his daily basis, annual basis, etc. And they make this note. So the Rebbe didn't do it. So what's the meaning of this note then? So then let's go back. The date is the 15th of Elul. I'm just reading. It's a letter, what's called a kloli prati, which is ostensibly written to one person, but it was sent out to many. And in this letter, the Rebbe is saying, people are asking what can they do in Elul time, somehow to boost the avodas Hashem, whatever was necessary for Elul. And the Rebbe says, and based on the Hatzlocha, which has been in the past, etc., that to gather during Elul and Yom Neiroim time, to gather Rabbim and should join all together in the inyan of Limud HaTorah, in the inyan of Tefillah B'Tzibur, and the Sinas HaTzedakah. And it should be B'Oishrei Ma'amid at the same event. Now, the Rebbe is encouraging to make events during Elul of people to come together for Torah, Tefillah, Tzedakah. And here it becomes the question, what are you going to do about this? How are you going to do this? If it's by night, there's a business of being given tzedakah by night. So here he has to address, he has to legitimize the union of giving tzedakah balayla. So he's not talking about Ma'ariv. I know you just read the note itself, it seems to be talking about Ma'ariv. He's not talking about Ma'ariv. He's talking about giving tzedakah balayla bichlal. In case you're not sure about this, take the Sicha from 3 days later, from Chai Elul. This was the first time the Rebbe gave out dollars at the Farbrengens. The Rebbe, from that then onwards, very often by the Farbrengens, he would then call up the Tankisten, and they would come line up past the Rebbe, and the Rebbe would give them a wad of notes, and they would go around the Farbrengen to give to people, each one of $1. That went on for many years, but that started that Farbrengen, and it seems to be very clear. And by this Farbrengen, the Rebbe also, the points which are discussed here, are also discussed in that Farbrengen about tzedakah balaylo. And the Rebbe says there's a difference whether you're giving to, if you're giving to a gabbat tzedakah, so then that's not mamish, it's tzedakah, because it's going to wait till it's going to get to the hands of the oni. And if an oni asks you, no question, you give balaylo. So the Rebbe talks about the same issues in the Farbrengen. And he then he talks about by the Rabbeim, they would make a magbis, which the Rebbe also would do, a collection at the Farbrengens. The Farbrengens are usually by night, and they would still make a magbis. If you remember, the Rebbe would give out Zettelach, with Fernanda till the Zettelach, and everyone should write Shmoy V'Shem Imoy, and the Rebbe would take them out at the end of the Farbrengen. So there was this whole seder of Tzedakah Balayla. So this is what the Rebbe is really addressing. Although it looks like, and if you just quote this note on itself, you say the Lubavitcher Rebbe gesagt, one should be giving tzedakah before davening Ma'ariv. But if you realize the context, that's not what he's really saying. He's justifying these peulas of in exceptional cases. And now I just want to share with you here on the screen. You have the actual photocopy Now, Reb Label is writing, it was talked about, the Rebbe had written in this Farbrengen. The Rebbe refers to the letter, and the Nichtav, about giving tzedakah before Meire, Belailo and Lifnei Meire. And now the Rebbe had given a reference to Tzaddik Chaim Tzaddik Beis. So Rabbi Groner writes a Rambam, which says G'dolei Chachamim would give tzedakah before davening. So you have here a good proof. And he says Lifnei Kodim Kol HaTfilah. And then he finds another place in Yeridei Simim Reish Mem Tes. Lifnei Kol HaTfilah, Lifnei Kol Tfilah. Sorry. Yeah, Lifnei Kol Tfilah. So in Erechayim, he doesn't say Lifnei Kol Tfilah. It just says Lifnei Atfilah. And but Yerdei says Lifnei Kol Tfilah. Here, I'm helping you. You see, yeah? In Yerechayim, it says Lifnei Kedem Tfilah. And in Yerdei, it says Kedem Kol Tfilah. So he's showing the Rebbe. But you have here a source for the idea that of giving before Ma'ariv, to which the Rebbe responds to that, and he says Stira. Then, if so, you want to bring a raya from Yeridei, it says Lifnei Kol Tfilah, but that is apparently a contradiction to where it says in Erechaim Lifnei Atfilah. And therefore the Rebbe continues, B'meila ein lo havi raya, B'adarabah or something. You can't bring a proof from there. Ein lo havi raya, what's the lashon here? V'ein yeshach l'imdein didan, B'adarabah. So, very strange. We're reading here the Rebbe's letter, and we hear the Rebbe's lashon. And the Rebbe refers to Yeridei Reish Mem Tes. So what's the Rebbe label writing to the Rebbe? So I suspect, and I don't have the resources to check it up now, but originally the Rebbe had written a reference just to Erechaim. And Rabbi Groner had said, well, actually, you have the same thing Yeridei. Initially, the Rebbe had rejected that because there's an inconsistency. But later the Rebbe accepted it, and therefore, in the later edition of the letter, the Rebbe also added, after saying Zilbos Ataimo, then he adds the reference to Yeridei Simim Reish Mem Tes. After Rabbi Groner had suggested it, and although the Rebbe had initially rejected it, but then he took it on board. The other point which Rabbi Groner had given a reference to a Rambam, G'dolei HaChachamim. So to this the Rebbe says, he writes, Pirush ma she'ein ken chulu. Looks like it wasn't so clear. So the Rebbe had said, very simply, since it says G'dolei HaChachamim, is mashma that most people this doesn't apply to. It's only G'dolei HaChachamim, so you can't give the Rambam as a reference for the inyan of giving tzedakah before every tefillah. For that, it should be a standard meaning, because the Rambam, why does the Rambam have to write G'dolei HaChachamim? Elamai, so that's why that reference is left out. There are more other Geschmacke Sachen about a pushka, about putting money in a pushka. And the Rabbi Groner mentions that the Rebbe didn't address about putting in a pushka, and the Rebbe says it depends what the pushka is. Is the pushka like a Gabbat tzedakah pushka? Then putting in the pushka is not a problem. If the pushka is as if it was owned by the poor people, you put it in the pushka, it becomes property of the poor people, and therefore you're entering into this whole issue of tzedakah b'layla. I want to finish off because I have to have 10 pieces on my list. So here's the Azevi by Bir Chametz, yeah. So now, connection to today's parsha. So Yaakov Avinu, when he wants to tell his children about the gates, and then the Stalkush Kinu Menu, and he was worried perhaps one of them have gone astray, and he says, and then they say, no, Shema Yisrael, here our Father Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, your God, our God, Hashem Echad, all one. Yeah, we discussed this not so long ago. But by the way, I have a different question. If when he meets with Yosef, he's already saying Shema Yisrael, so how can you say, yeah, like we say, Shoya Koyas Shema? So what does it mean that when he wants to be Megal the Kates, that's when they invented this phrase? He was already saying Shema before, so I don't know the answer to that. But coming back, so Yaakov, the sons of Yaakov say Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, to which Yaakov Avinu responds, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Leilam Vod. More in Psochim says that Moshe said it, Yaakov didn't. That Yaakov said it, Moshe didn't say it. So we have this Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Leilam Vod. So Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Leilam Vod has got 24 letters. Shema Yisrael has got 25 letters. As you know, on the shoulders of the Kohen Gadol, we have two stones. Shisham, Mishmoisam, Alav, Noachos, and each one has got 25 letters. So the Baruch Shema Yisrael and Baruch Shem, each have got six words. Shisham, Mishmoisam, but here it's 25 and 24. Okay, and as we know, Shema Yisrael and Baruch Shem, one's Yichud Ilah, one's Yichud Torah. Fine. So now, here's a word from this is from the Bnei Yissaschar. It says the following, that the words Cholu Tfilis David ben Yishai, the last words of the Sefer base in Tehillim, those is 1,358 words. Letters, sorry, Gematria. It's Gematria 1,358. Baruch Shem Kvein Machus Le'Levoid is also 1,358, same Gematria. Fine, okay. But then he goes the following. By the way, this first word is also in Yashmiya Kol Tilosi from Rabbi Heber. He quotes this from another source. Then he says the following. The second last posuk of Ayin basis. Uvoruch Shem Kvoide Li'olam v'Yimolech Kvoides Kol Ha'oretz Amen v'Yomen Kol Tfilas Daven Yishem. So he says that Le'osid Lovoi there will be Yimolech Kvoides Kol Ha'oretz. Hashem's glory will fill the whole earth. So where till now was only Yehuda Tator, will be Yehuda Ilah. And if so, instead of being 25 letters, instead of being 24 letters, we went 25 letters. So Baruch Shem Kvoid Malchusa will have an extra letter. Which extra letter will be added to Baruch Shem? Baruch Shem Kvoid Malchusa. Say Shema Yisrael, and right away, Baruch Shem Kvoid Malchusa. So Baruch Shem will have 25 letters. If Baruch Shem will have 25 letters, so then the Gematria of Kol Tfilas David ben Yishai will be lost. That's the Pshat, Kol Tfilas David ben Yishai. That Tfilah of David ben Yishai, which corresponds to Baruch Shem, will become obsolete when Baruch Shem will have Baruch Shem Kvoidai. So then, okay, so we see all of this. Gesundheit, Mata Masort Wochen. A gute Woche.
Ja.
Koyach. Gute Woche.
Go ahead.